Luc Montpellier, you're the cinematographer for Women Talking, about the women of a Mennonite community who have been abused by the men of their community. What did you think about the script when you first read it, and what ideas emerged there from the start?
Well, I had the fortune of having worked with Sarah on all her feature films, all her narrative feature films from the beginning. So we have this very specific process that Sarah loves to work in. It was as she's writing early drafts of the script, she will send it to me and I'll be able to read it at that stage. And she has a few people she does that with, so that, and when she hands me the script, she usually will tell me, very few sentences to set the tone of what she's trying to do. And it kind of gets me in an advanced way to start thinking about visuals when I'm reading it. So then we have a conversation, and sometimes she goes back and starts injecting some of those ideas. So I feel quite fortunate. And for this film, she basically handed me the script and said, I want the imagery in this film to feel as epic and weighted as the decision that these women need to make. Based on their unwavering faith and, them trying to figure out their future and reinvent that despite not being allowed to in their colony, in their society. So to me, as I was reading it, it just kind of cued these kind of epic images, and also this idea of unwavering faith, of how do you support that with the photography. And, hence we ended up talking a lot about Gothic imagery and the weight and kind of repression of that a little bit. And the idea that, but at the same time, trying not to judge our women for that faith, because there's also something quite beautiful about believing in something so much. But unfortunately, in this story, it's kind of betrayed them, because they're trying to make sense of how could God let this happen to us? How could these things happen? So it was important to me as well, as much as having this very weighted image and epic imagery and Gothic imagery, that there was a little bit of hope, because we tried to contrast this very intense discussion in the loft with this beauty of the colony outside. So the camera's constantly shifting from these very intense ideas, and also sometimes very controversial ideas. And sometimes the camera would just drift outside to a bunch of children playing and remind you constantly of what they were fighting for. So to me, that's what I'm really, Sarah really wanted to use the camera, because the novel that it's based on is entirely takes place in the loft. And she goes, it's important for us to world build for the audience, because none of us live on these colonies. And we did, obviously, all of us, as much research as possible. But she didn't want to, again, impose judgment on it. So it was important for us to kind of integrate into things in a very personal way. And to me, that's what I was hoping the imagery would do, is that it would give you this sense of weight that they have on their shoulders, based on tradition, but that you'd still find a bit of hope. Hence a little bit of a color that we reintegrated in. And to me, skin tone was a very important kind of baseline for that, that you would be, watching these amazing performances, amazing faces throughout the entire film, that whatever color treatment that we did, it needed to be accessible still, based on the skin tone. So we have ended up designing everything around that, the level of desaturation, the tones in the costumes, Peter Costco's set design, everything was calibrated to the skin tone. Yeah.
And when so much of the story is set in that one location, that hayloft, what's it like, sort of creating that visual quality in that hayloft, times of day, the moods of the scenes, and just keeping that one location dynamic?
No, that's a good question. I mean, time plays such a huge time of day in the film. Takes, we knew we wanted to use that as a bit of a tension element, a little bit of a tension, because the men could come back anytime as they've been taken away to the city. So it was really important for us that you felt time shifting within the loft, but not in a very obvious way. And also, because this time is shifting, we almost needed to freeze time to be able to, because Sarah was using time of day again in a tense kind of way that, magic hour or sunset only lasts for a very short period of time. So having that mandate in a very performance heavy film, it was important for me to freeze time in a stage, so that we shot a lot of the loft against, actually almost all of the interiors, against blue screen, so that we could hand over the set to Sarah and the cast. So we all knew that performance was going to be a huge part of this. So having that frozen time in the loft allowed us to very much design a camera that would very much serve as like a supporting actor for what was happening. So Sarah handed me this amazing document. She usually hands me a shot list that we go through together and we start dreaming about things. But on this film, she handed me a turning points document where she basically rewrote her script and outlined in every scene what it was about, and also what the dynamics were between characters, because a lot of times characters would change their perspective based on the arguments being had in the loft, which essentially ended up guiding us as far as camera goes. So whether it was crossing the axis at a pivotal moment where Marieke is basically telling us that she's as much responsible for what's happened to her as what happened to her, letting it happen, of finding that exact silence to be able to shift from one axis to the other. So subtle camera moves like that, I think, really help to accentuate moments and to guide your attention to, you really need to pay this attention. Sarah never wanted to shy away from using the camera to support and to enhance, very much like a more kind of classic film would do in, let's say, a very male-oriented, committed, very dramatic film. She wanted to have that same treatment with our women. Hence the super widescreen that we ended up, playing with, especially in the loft. She wanted in the loft to have frames filled with women's faces at all times. And then we very sparingly would go to a close-up of someone that's separate. But when you did go to someone's close-up, that extra real estate with the 2:7:6 aspect ratio really isolated them. So that, to me, it was almost like epic filmmaking, but in a very single location, because what was happening in the film was very epic to these women. It was a very important thing. So all those decisions were always drawn from what was happening. And you ended up with these beautiful group shots all the time. And also, enabled us to, we were very conscious of where the camera was as far as point of view and where we were on axis, based on, again, sometimes combating two ideas. We were very intentional about being on profiles for those moments at times, where sometimes where there was more connection, we would, essentially get into the eye line a little bit more. So everything in the loft, as you say, because it was one location, needed to be as involved, because we didn't want, it's such a temptation for a film like this to just stand back and just photograph everyone in a close-up and just photograph it all and figure it out in the edit. But we were very, very intentional with, because we also didn't want the film to feel static in a way. We didn't want you to be watching. It was definitely, the word fable came around a lot early in prep, where this is a comment on a real event. It's an impressionistic version of that we weren't there to document the reality, even though there's a realism based on the world we created. So it kind of gave us license to again, play with time, do a little bit of real-time time lapse. Again, that to me is kind of the climax of the entire piece, when the sun goes down in real time as little Meep is being held. And even though the men could be arriving any minute, time just stops, which causes tension, but it also shows how much faith they have. And it's quite beautiful.
I want to congratulate you on your work on the film. It's very complex and beautiful, but looks effortless, which I think is always a goal. So thank you so much for talking to me about it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Nice meeting you.